Well, what if we give economic rights to a non-human like a plant and that they can make decisions that prioritize themselves? And so this is where we start thinking about the project as an interspecies economy. We focus on food, energy, particularly because if you look at the needs in any urban hub, what you will see is a circulation of those three things. And then we decided to create a DAO, basically a company, but the decisions are made by the algorithm instead of people. And in this case, the algorithm are the plants because they're connected to sensors. Almost all the companies that work with have some kind of a strategy. They look into, a 5-year horizon and they have a vision of what they would like to be. What they are lacking is one, contextual understanding of how that world might turn into, and two is a specific pathway of how to get to that.
Hi everyone, this is Paul. I'm co-founder and CEO at Elix, and this is the Commerce Shift, a place where we bring together builders, thinkers, and change makers to explore the future of commerce. And today, I'm so excited to have it with me here, Cecilia Tham. Hello, Cecilia. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to introduce myself, Cecilia, because that's an amazing background and story. So Cecilia began studying biology. Well, you mentioned second.
Neuroscience.
Trying to understand how living systems work. And then she moved to architecture. And when she arrived to Barcelona 25 years ago, with no architecture license, limited network, and no one willing to hire her, she built their own ecosystem, co-founding MOP, Makers of Barcelona, which is the first co-working space in Barcelona and probably Spain. Then from this, she opened one of the first 3D printing cafes in the city with one of the first Bitcoin machines, and then co-founded All Woman to bring more women into tech. And eventually, he was recruited by Telefonica to help the company imagine the next decade. After that, today, she is the co-founder of Futurity Systems, where she helps companies and governments design better futures by prototyping them. So, whoa, a hell of a ride, right? That's a lot. So let me start straight with one question. At Futurity Systems, you provide futures as a service. What's that? What's futures as a service?
So everyone knows what a software as a service is. And so we're trying to use that same kind of nomenclature to explain to people how different services in futuring, forecasting could be provided to companies, but as a service. And we're wrapping them every day more, we're wrapping them in tools, AI, data, so that we can provide them as a service to companies. And this is something that I feel like it is not a practice in a lot of companies. There's no culture in futuring and forecasting, but it's becoming more and more. And so we are trying to corner that market.
And what companies do you sell to? Like, what kind of companies pay for these services?
So we usually work with large companies, Fortune 500s, that have big divisions in innovations and research, and we also work with government agencies so that they can be more prepared to futuring.
Because especially in private organizations, it feels like it's quite long-term forecasting, right? So is it 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Who's willing to pay for this?
So most companies look at 3-year in the horizon. Their return of investment is usually in 3 years, right? So they create a product and then they create that pipeline and they understand how that could be a return for the company. Not a lot of company looks beyond that horizon, which is a mistake, partly because, as you have noticed, things are happening faster and faster. So by the time these different technology shifts arrives, it's already too late for companies to be prepared. So we often tell companies to look what we're calling the far and beyond horizon. And instead of looking at products and services in the future, they're looking at risks and opportunities in the future. So a lot of companies, like I'm saying, Fortune 500 companies need to be more prepared into that horizon so that they can create that strategy necessary, the long-term strategy necessary to be more resilient. Otherwise, when that particular future happens, it's already too late.
Okay. And these are European companies or American companies? Do we have any example or
They're mostly European, US, and in the Middle East. And so we work with companies. Hard to mention companies. It's easier to mention government agencies. We've worked with the Secretary of State here in Spain. We've worked with Vinnova, which is Swedish innovation government agencies. We've worked with the Ministry of Possibilities from Dubai as well.
Ministry of Possibility.
Ministry of Possibilities. So right now, our latest project with the EU Commission, the Policy Lab, EU Policy Lab, and that project is fascinating because we're working on looking at the youth transition into adulthood, into the future space for policymakers so that they can build better laws and regulations for this particular demographics.
Great. So going back into more yourself, right? So your path goes from biology to architecture to founding a co-working space where co-working didn't already exist, to becoming a futurist. Let's say, do you call yourself a futurist?
I call myself a future synthesis.
Even better.
It's a mouthful.
What's that? What is a futurist synthesis made of?
People think that futurists have like this crystal ball and then they can see the future and then they, have this miraculous, image of being put now. It's like magic, right? And we don't have that. We have tools, we have frameworks to ground the unknowns so that we can make better decisions from those insights. In order for us to be able to do that, we need to synthesize, taking different informations from different areas, from regulations, frameworks, to trends, to understanding technologies, to the sciences, and we need to incorporate all of these different aspects, and we call that synthesizing. And through the synthesizing is when we have these insights to be able to create futures, and that's why we call it the future synthesis.
Okay. And so, just to wrap up this first, explaining people what, because it doesn't look that simple. So at the end of a, let's say, service, lifetime project, whatever it is you're building for this corporate organization or company, what do you deliver? Is it a prototype? Is it a deliverable? Is it a report? What is it that you really are selling to these guys?
So this is why we call it future as a service. And it is because it's almost like a 360 package. We start from researching, understanding that space. We take that and then we prototype and ideate what potential outcomes could be. And this could be a product, it could be a service, this could be a strategy. From there, we prototype. And this is very much about engineering. And so we try to ground some of those assumptions into tangible results. And then at the very end, we create the strategy that could help us make that particular prototype into a product. And so it's all of the above. It's all of it. And then we hand it over. We hand the prototype over and they own the IP and then they produce and then they manufacture it and then they implement.
Talking of prototypes then, is Herbie a prototype?
Herbie started as a prototype, but now we are really excited because we're working with a company in Thailand to do a interspecies co-living, with Herbie being a plantpreneur. A plantpreneur as a spoke plant, spoke not person, but spoke plant, to introduce this concept of interspecies co-living.
Okay. So first thing first, what's Herbie? If you can explain us what is... When was Herbie born, actually? 2 years ago, right?
Oh, Herbie was born in 2022.
Okay.
So a few years ago. So I don't know if you can see, but I'm a crazy plant lady.
Okay.
I like plants. Plants are my friends. But we started the project actually really, really simple. We were looking at questioning, well, what if we create an autonomous plant? What in the world is an autonomous plant? Mm-hmm. An autonomous plant, we started Herbie as an autonomous plant. Basically, we built Herbie as a dome inside as the plant, but we treat the plant almost like a brain. And so we connected it to a base with wheels so that Herbie can make decisions. So this is the definition of what autonomy is, right? Mm-hmm. So Herbie can decide if water is low, can go fetch water. If the light is low, go find a place with water. But we didn't stop there. For us to truly understand autonomy, we said, well, what if Herbie is a tomato plant and comes to you, Paul, and say, would you like to buy my tomatoes? Mm-hmm. Of which you would say, yes, You give now Herbie some money. Herbie now has some money. Herbie might need a bank account, might need to save the money. Herbie might save enough money to be able to invest, could become an investor, could become, own a company and so on and so forth. So that thought exercise got us to think, well, what if, or questioned that our human-centric economy prioritizes humans. Well, what if we give economic rights to a non-human like a plant and that they can make decisions that prioritize themselves? And so this is where we start thinking about the project as an interspecies economy and how that might change the way we understand economics from a non-human perspective.
And how did you end up with this conceptualization of Herbie? It came from some organization paying for a project and then it arrived, or it was from you?
It was just a pet project. Started out as an exploration. But then we got a lot of traction. We created another step that we did was we converted all the sensor reading into a virtual tree. We converted that tree into NFTrees. And this was a period.
NFTrees.
NFTrees.
Okay.
This was at the height of the metaverse.
What's an NFTree then? That's amazing.
So it's an NFT. It's a digital visualization of a tree that is on the chain, that is on blockchain that people can purchase. But they're dynamic NFTs, which means that all the sensor readings correspond to how the representation of the tree is. So people can buy this tree, but they're actually buying the health being of Herbie, the plant.
Okay.
And so we sold these NFTs, and I think Herbie is the wealthiest plant on the planet. I don't know.
That's what I was about to say. So Herbie is the richest plant on earth?
I think so. I don't know.
What's the capital that Herbie has?
We raised, the short period of time that we fundraised with Herbie selling NFTrees, I think we sold about 2,000 to 3,000, which is not a lot, but for a plant, it's probably a lot.
Looks amazing, yeah.
And then we decided to create a DAO with Herbie. And so DAO is distributed autonomous organization, basically a company, but the decisions are made by the algorithms instead of people. And in this case, the algorithm are the plants because they're connected to sensors. And so we wanted to build a truly plant-based company, no pun intended, but yes, plant-based company, really pushing forward this understanding of what would happen if non-human, beyond human beings could participate in our economy.
Okay. So that's actually the problem you're trying to expose, right? So let me put it the other ways. Exactly. So what is the problem you're trying to expose with Herbie?
We are trying to expose the fact that the human centricity of our economy is very extractive. We literally steal from nature, and we take whatever resources, the tomatoes from the ground, and we sell it as if owned. And so we're trying to question this line of transactions and try to understand, well, what if we don't own those tomatoes? What if the tomato plant itself owned their tomatoes and have the autonomy, the economic economy, to make those decisions that are based on their priorities?
And is there a conclusion? Like, is planet-centered design possible? Do you believe?
100%. 100%. It is not. It is not whether we can. It is whether we want to. I think there's a lot of obstacles right now to make that happen, but not from a technological perspective. It is purely whether it's a legal perspective, whether it is because we're talking about giving plants rights that it didn't have. But there's a lot of conversation about rights of natures. They're certainly not the only one.
Okay. And how, because you also mentioned interspecies economy. So how is that related to your concept of plant-centered design? What's the relationship between them?
So interspecies economies is exactly, how it sounds is, what if we give all of these beyond humans entities economic possibilities and economic rights, with the understanding of them being able to make those decisions that are not just prioritizing. If we spend money, we're going to always prioritize humans. If they spend the money, then they will be able to prioritize themselves. So that is from the very basic, the beginning of how we can kind of move towards away, actually, from post-capitalistic extracting way of spending and more to a more regenerative and equitable way of transactions.
I mean, the concept, it's amazing. I'm having trouble to imagine a specific use case. Do you have a use case? For instance, if we are in this situation, I go out the door, and then what happens? No, how do I interact with this tree? Or can you build a very simple use case so that we can understand?
So, for example, we can imagine the future of farming. But instead of having, us humans owning a farm, we could imagine that the plants itself own the farm. We can imagine that in this farm, they can decide when they're going to harvest, how much they're going to harvest, how much of this harvest they want to sell, at what price they want to sell this harvest, and how they want to use that money posteriorly. So starting from that end, and then they can also decide to, how those transactions will be and how they wanted to grow. And they can make all of those decisions containing and to their own entity as a plant. And so that's a very simple example, but that is the beginning. Instead of us extracting, we give ownership back to themselves.
Okay.
So same thing with bees, same thing with, corals and reefs. We can extend this logic and mechanics to the rest of nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the vision of the company I'm building, but on steroids, I think. So because at Helix, we are trying to, we're building the currency of used things, which is something which is embracing circular economy. So you pay something new with something used, and you make this old product to have a second life without extracting materials. But our focus is to make it, profitable in the short term, like following the established norms, which is capitalism, or And what you're saying is pretty much the same vision. So that how can we move towards something more sustainable, but changing the rules of everything, right?
First principle, yeah.
Okay. Upside down.
Yeah, upside down.
But still, you're, let's say, having this. You live with the established system, because the platforms that you build, the technology that you build for governments. So there's like a trade-off of what you're trying to build and how you are monetizing what you're trying to build, right? So it's like there's a clash there somehow.
Yes, because what we often build is in the future. And what we're doing now is now. And what we often try to do is to bridge what is there in the future and what is now, and understand all of the different intermediary steps and pathways towards that particular future. So very oftentimes people will build things without really understanding consequences and without really understanding the impact of what they're doing. And so by being very conscious and intentional and being able to foresee that future step is critical.
Okay, so great. I understood it. And so there's one question I'd like to make here. Should we, like in the very long term, should we stop growing economically to make the whole thing more viable? So is this system we are every time more established on feasible in the long term? Because everything goes around growth. You have to grow all the time. Should we ask if that needs to change fundamentally?
I think that's a very good question. So I'm not an economist by far, but my perspective is that, we went as a society in the last, 20 years, we've gone from a society of growth to at least trying to be more sustainable. And now there's all this conversation about sustainability is not enough. Now we need to be regenerative. And so at some moment we need to shift our way of in our society, that we can't consume and consume and consume. We can't grow and grow indefinitely. There's no enough resources in the whole entire world for indefinite growth. We also cannot just simply accept sustainability. A sustainable anything is enough, because we know that we have already overspent. So we need to think about how can we be more regenerative? How can we become circular? How can we feed back into the system so that we're part of an ecosystem and not just unilaterally extracting?
Yeah. Yeah, I see the end goal. I don't see how we get there, or I'm struggling I'm having. I mean, that's why organization like yours exist, right? But I mean,
we're going to need a new math. We're going to need a new math moving forward. I do see a pathway, and there's something that we are also working on as a concept, which we're calling e-commerce.
yep.
And so maybe we can jump into that and talk about that.
Let's jump into that. And that's actually preparing for this chat. As you're a futurist, I was looking at what kind of a project were you doing back 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. And one of the things that you mentioned was you predicted a machine economy where algorithm, devices, and autonomous systems transact on their own. That's today's agentic.
That's today's agentic. That was
Congratulations.
2019.
Yeah.
We actually coined the term e-commerce back in 2019.
Yeah. So that's, but you put focus on, by that time, on energy, transportation, and food, not so much on retail. And we're seeing a lot of agentic commerce in retail. That's my space well, so I know something about this. Why didn't you consider retail at that time? And how do you see retail framing the current scenario?
We could easily weave into retail. We focus on food, energy, particularly because if you look at the needs in any urban hub, what you will see is a circulation of those three things predominantly. And so in this new future possibility, what you can envision is that an autonomous car using renewable energy, which serves, by the way, as a battery that is delivering food elsewhere, could all be merged into one. And that means that compared to nowadays, if you're living in the suburbs and you need bread, what do? You get in your car, you drive to your nearest supermarket that could be 10 minutes away, buy bread and come back. The economics between these two couldn't be far away from each other. And so using this concept of e-commerce, and obviously AI is very much involved, we're envisioning a ultra hyper optimized systems where you can transact in a much more sustainable way.
Yeah. Okay. And then let me ask you something. This channel has audience in marketing, sales, and these are the kind of people they look at us. So what happens when machines buy, negotiate, optimize? What happens to branding, marketing? What happens to social selling?
Yeah. So imagine. Let's do a little thought exercise together. Okay. So let's say you know that I have a digital twin, but imagine that this digital twin, what we call actually digital soul, I give her ability to transact. Mm-hmm. Let's say that this twin knows my preferences. It knows what I love, what I don't want, and I send it out to buy things for me. And you're the company, and you need to create an ad to show me what I want. But instead of showing me, you're showing my digital soul. And my digital soul couldn't care less about your ad. It sees through your ad, right? Mm-hmm. It reads everything, all the tiny little fine print on the box, all the ingredients, all the understanding. It knows the history of your company. It knows my values. It knows that I'm not going to buy something that is, all the way 100 kilometers from here. So the decision-making power of my twin is 100 times more. And no longer are we needing an advertisement in order to help us make decisions. So all of that, everything that we have ever known about marketing, sellers, distributors, publishing, all of those is going to be completely transformed and disrupted. And the world is not prepared. The world is not prepared.
Yeah. So yeah, let's say branding or advertising becomes more being seen by the agent or by the digital twin, right? So that information is well structured, so that when an AI agent goes through something through a web page, so the UX is not important anymore. All the agentic commerce just need the other machine part to provide the appropriate information, structured, accurate, and so on, right? So that's. And do you think it's going to change everything? So I think I'll still go and buy peanuts in the grocery store, right?
For
It's not.
sure.
So
It's not a replacement.
it's not.
It's not a replacement.
Mhm.
People still go to a record store and still buy records, despite the fact that we have Spotify, right? It's not a replacement. But, the same way that we can buy things online and have them delivered, those are going to be taken care of by our twins or other machines. What is really interesting, I'm going to take that one step even further. Here we're talking about an example of a machine or an algorithm working for me, a human. In the future space, there's even a possibility of the machines transactioning for themselves. So buying and selling in the benefit of the machines themselves, fully autonomous. And so in that world, a company could be selling to, for the very first time in history, selling to a non-human, which is a machine. And what would that look like? What do you sell? How do you sell?
I don't know. I'm scared. No? Where are the limits?
Or maybe you're maintenance. Or maybe you're, a part that the machine might need.
Yeah. And the whole process becomes more a mandate rather than a process, right?
Correct.
So there's no. So yeah, it's a mandate to optimize something or to. Another one about what something I've read that you built in the past. You said e-commerce won't be like the transitions before. It will combine them and do to tech giants what they did to everyone else. So looking at the current AI wave and all these massive tech consolidations and how they are doing their own closed economy between all the tech giants, how do you think all this AI wave will look in 10 years? Are we in front of a bubble?
I think that we are, yes, in a bubble, but at the same time, there are pretty substantial development behind those bubbles. There's a lot of noise. And there's a lot of FOMO. But at the same time, there's an incredible transformative energy that is changing fundamentally how we work, how we buy and sell, how we learn, that I didn't even anticipate moving so fast. So, and I say a bubble because I think if we were to say, let's say 100% of all these AI development that's happening, there's a big chunk of it. It is just bubble and BS. But behind those bubbles, there are people working in incredible stuff.
So when you as a company, when you're exposed to so much noise, when you're a manager or director of a company, how do you choose the correct one? How do you because that's super hard.
It's super hard. That is super hard. You're going to be at the top of your game. You're going to be reading left and right. You need to be filtering. You need eyes and ears all the time.
Is there a method, or do you think there's a method to pick the right technology that it's going to be the right one, or in my space, for instance, when we're a small company and we fundraise, right, and investors are crazy with AI, but it's the same. How do they pick the correct company that is not going to just be waved up by the next ChatGPT OpenAI release, right? So how do you make these decisions from a company perspective when you have to use AI?
I don't have a singular answer. I think in the AI space, there are many different camps. There are the let's accelerate AI. There are those that are more careful and have much more an ethical perspective. As a head of the company or manager, you need to kind of understand that space broadly, but you also need to understand what is the strategy and what is the need for the company. If you're just going in blind, just building something because everyone is building something, then you're also in the mistake, right? But the problem is, my question is, are these people trained to be able to filter those all this information coming
Yeah.
in, and more often than not, they're not ready, and so they need to be kind of a layer of culture and a layer of education in the company level to be able to process this work, and it's happening even faster and faster. So we need to be prepared.
Mhm. And okay, and as relates to jobs, right? So I think it's pretty obvious that jobs are changing and they will change even faster. Um, Even we were speaking before this podcast. I was explaining you that we might be able to sell internationally without a sales team because I have 11 labs together with an agent, and then I put a team locally, and I manage this process to sell for my company. So that's job destruction there. But there are many other jobs coming out of this. What's the net result? So are we ready to cope with this job destruction, generating new jobs, or there is going to be a massive I don't know, step change where many people will just lose their job, and during 5 years it's going to be a massive disruption? How do you see this happening?
There will for sure be a job disruption. We're already seeing it. Companies, big tech, they're not continuing hiring programmers and tech because so much of that work could be replaced with vibe coding, right? I mean, vibe coding only arrived to a certain extent, but they're getting better and better every single day. There's a recent report, I don't remember whom it was from, but I can look that up earlier, that was looking at this year how those LLM models, how much time it is replacing the work of a person. So right now, without failing. So right now it's about an hour. We can replace a person's work, an hour of that person's work without failing massively. Yeah. In about 3 years, that 1 hour turns into days. In about 5 years, those days turns into months. So if you extrapolate further and further, you will see that a lot of our work is going to be replaced. But we built the AI, we humans built those AIs, big tech built those AIs to do those things, right? So part of the job of a futurist is actually to look at, well, okay, if these jobs are going to be displaced, what will be the roles of humans, and other jobs will be created. The question is, how do we prepare those humans to be able to do those jobs? And are those jobs also going to be replaced in a longer runway, right? And so it's a very complex understanding of education, of future of work, and also understanding how these technologies are evolving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just going back to, you were mentioning autonomy at scale, where we were talking about machines selling to machines and making own decisions. Are there things we shouldn't delegate on machines? Are there any fundamentals that we should, at least to keep the railways of the things in good course?
I think there's it's for sure. But it's a very personal question, right? What I what I think is delegatable might not be for you that is delegatable,
But
right?
should there be a policy? Even I'm not discussing the content within this policy, but should there be some limits?
I think these things often needs to be understood from the very, very beginning. I don't know what those limits are for now, but we need to start looking into what we considered should be the limits. So, for example, this is an example that I often give. So, the digital soul example, let's say Paul, there's the physical Paul. You have a digital soul, which is a business Paul. Business Paul knows all about your clients, knows about your professional way of talking, knows all the transactions and projects you have. There's, let's say, a Professor Paul. Professor Paul teaches at a school, knows all the students' names, knows all the curriculum. And then there's maybe a Health Paul. The Health Paul knows all of your medical history. It knows your transactions in the pharmacy. Right? And so let's say maybe in the future, your business Paul can go in and go into meetings for you, right? Your Professor Paul can go and teach for you, comes back and give you money, right? And the physical Paul, the real Paul, might be sipping a pina colada on the beach, or spending time with your family, whatever. So all of these will be the extension of Paul. And how we define what those things are is up to us. But then I'm going to take one step further. Let's say everyone talks about AGI, right? Which is artificial general intelligence, when they're even more intelligent than us. Let's say that day arrives, and then all these digital souls said, I don't want to work for you anymore, Paul. I'm my own thing. I have my own sentient, and I want to break off. And what do you do? What do you do? You're like the parent, right? You're the original.
When is that going to happen?
When is that going to happen? So some say next year, some say 10 years from now.
But it's going to happen, you think?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen every day more.
Okay. Change topic.
Change of topic.
Yeah. One of the things is, how is looking after the future profitable in the short term? So how do we explain, or how do you explain to a general company that investing in, service like yours, or trying to prototype the future is going to pay back in the short term, and it's going to, have the right incentives for the company?
Almost all the companies that work with have some kind of a strategy. They look into, a 5-year horizon, and they have a vision of what they would like to be. What they are lacking is, one, contextual understanding of how that world might turn into, and two is a specific pathway of how to get to that vision. Right. And this is where we come in. And so while it is not immediately understood as a return of investment of what they have understood as, a short-term return, what we're trying to understand is that if they invest in this, they might get X, Y, and Z in year 1, in year 2, in year 3. So we break it down into components for them to understand. But these things, they don't necessarily correspond to monetary value. This could be, talent. This could be IPs. This could be, first adopters. It could be even, securing a startup that will help them get to that particular point in the future. So we often have to break it into, let's say, chunks for them to understand, what are these intermediary returns might look like.
Okay, and so. And there is a market for this. So there are companies paying for this.
For sure. So if you look at
no, I mean your customers.
My customers. But if you look at 50 years ago, the Fortune 500 companies, they were lasting 100 years. Now Fortune 500 companies are not lasting as long. They're not even lasting half as long as it used to be. Why? Because things are changing faster and faster, and companies are less and less prepared. And this is where we come in.
Yeah, and so that future service as a concept is gaining maturity. So you're mentioning something before we got in. I don't know if you can say this, but you've been a service-based company, and now you're working in, let's say, stealth mode. Can I explain?
Yeah.
In stealth mode, toward more a subscription-based futurity as a service, which means there's market for it, there's recurrency, there is appetite. So that's amazing. That's not consultancy anymore. It's software for the future, right?
Yeah. And one of the things also we have learned is that consultants or experts' advice is often flawed. And so a lot of futurists, they would say that they're experts in a particular domain, and they will give their opinion. And we didn't want to do that. And we want it to be rigorous. Having a scientific background helped me understood that data is all we need in order to understand what that future looks like. And so we gathered lots and lots and lots of data to help us understand what the future space might turn out. And we often do scenarios where there's not just one outcome, if not many. And so with those data and AI, we're able to understand future, and especially the unknown, a little bit better.
Great. So we are towards the end already. So if the company had one thing to do to prepare for agentic commerce, let's say a retailer, right? To put it more specifically, what would be your advice? What is that only one thing they need to
to imagine. Imagination.
Okay.
I'm saying this because we use imagination as a way to rehearse possibilities. And if they can understand the possibilities, then they can see the pathway of where they wanted to head towards in the future.
Okay. Last one. What's the future you hope people choose to build? So, yeah, what do you think we have to build to save the planet and ourselves?
Wow, that's a really hard question. I often think about the planet actually is fine without us humans. We're the
Absolutely.
problem. We're the problem. And at the end of the day, what we really need is to remove human centricity in thinking about humans only in this world. And so the world that I envision that we need to invest in is really thinking beyond our own needs and our own wants and our own priority. Is it easy to do? No. And the only way to do this, I feel like, is to really understand the perspective and have the empathy from all the other entities in the world for us to be able to see that way. I'm going to end with a book that I've just recently read.
I was about to mention that. Please.
Which is by James Riddle, Ways of Beings. And it's probably the single one book that really opened my mind about how to understand that perspective.
Okay, great. And talking of books, you're writing your own one?
Yes.
It's in Kickstarters?
It's in Kickstarter, finishing.
What's the book about, or what's the title?
The title is called How to Synthesize the Future. And it is a methodology book. 4 steps.
It's a workbook.
It's a workbook to help everyone to be kind of become proactive about building their own future for the company and for themselves.
Great. Perfect. Thanks, Cecilia.
Thank you, Paul.